help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I am Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion. Welcome to our studio. Once again, we are at the HQ of 40 Days for Life, the now closed Planned Parenthood, where 40 Days for Life first began, right out behind me on the sidewalks. We hope you are having a great 2023. We have a lot to talk about. We are going to talk about, do men belong in the pro-life movement? And I hope the answer is yes, because otherwise I've wasted a lot of my life. So we will discuss that. Speaking of men, we want to remind you to get Scalpel and the Soul, Dr. Haywood's wonderful book. We still have some signed copies left. You can also get it on Amazon. We have gotten rave reviews, and Haywood has made a lot of interviews around the country. He got a big feature with the Federalist, so shout out to them for covering the book. But the media coverage has been great. The book is great, and be sure to buy it. If you want to get it on Amazon, you can. If you want a signed copy, get it directly from us, and also help our mission at 40daysforlife.com. 40daysforlife.com. Just go to the store and get Haywood's book. Today, I am joined by Heather Gardner. Welcome.
Thanks, Sean. Glad to be here.
We are without Steve Carlin.
We are. It's a little odd and empty right now.
I think it's great. And I want to highlight that we are without Steve today. We're not supposed to be. Steve, who apparently has like the mark of the beast when it comes to travel, he just always gets delayed. So if you want to see Steve and you're bringing him to your town, I don't know, give him a week.
Add an extra couple of days. So yeah, maybe a week.
But his travel stuff is still like, it's all in the winter. But it's summer. So there's no problems in Madison, Wisconsin. He just has, I think he's cursed in so many different ways. But the travel problem, so Steve's not here. He's on his way. He landed. He has his rental car. We're recording a bunch of stuff today that you'll see. But he texted you and told you specifically not to record this podcast that we're about to record on men, and I insisted that we record it because we don't need Steve to talk about men.
This is all on Sean, Steve. It's all on Sean.
I have a clean conscience. Perhaps mistakenly so. If my conscience is bothered, it sure as heck isn't because I didn't listen to Steve, who was late, who didn't show up, and on top of that said, hey, by the way, make up another podcast. Don't use any of the ones that I wrote. And so we're using Steve's favorite podcast. One of his favorite topics, actually, men and abortion. But it is an important topic, and we are going to dive in. And before we do, I have a question for you because many people know you. You work with so many of the leaders. You're in charge of 40 Days for Life 365. You've been doing this a long time. You led all the campaigns in Austin, which is an insane place. Y'all had the fire. Y'all have had a lot of persecution. Y'all have had a lot of nuts come out. And you have thick skin. You don't really get offended. I don't really get offended. I've been insulted or something, but I don't like get offended at things. And you don't really get offended at things. As a woman, I mean, how great is it that men are now winning all of your awards?
What is a woman, though, Sean? I think we need to define.
All of the women are playing your sports, winning your awards. We saw recently, Miss Netherlands is a dude.
Okay.
Not a good-looking man and not a good-looking woman. Just a bad, all-around, like, not a good image for anybody. Don't Google it. But, I mean, when at some point are you going to, like, as a woman, are you offended by that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that does offend me. I think that should offend all women. What I have actually loved, I guess, in spite of all of this ridiculousness that we're seeing in our culture now, where even men can be better women than women can, is that there's a lot of people that are kind of reaching their hands across the aisle and joining forces to try to fight all of this. So there's a lot of people who would consider themselves radical feminists that have been fighting for women's rights for years and even decades. And now they're seeing, okay, now a man has won, a female role has won Miss Netherlands, or all these other different things.
Woman of the Year. We've seen Women of the Year.
Woman of the Year, all those types of things, showing that after all of this progress that we've made over these last few decades, now this is what we've come to. And so there's quite a few people who are on both the conservative side and the liberal or leftist side that are quite, they're quite done with all of this. And they thankfully are joining together to fight at the local level. We see a lot of those examples.
Women. This is the death of a woman. It's definitely the death of the tomboy, which we've talked about before. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to be a woman and be a good athlete.
Yeah.
You were supposed to be a boy.
Or be a woman and do things that boys tend to like to do more than girls do at certain ages, like, climb trees and roughhouse a little bit, things like that. Those are, I was a little bit of a tomboy too growing up. And now it's like, oh, little Janie must be a boy, because she likes to climb trees. Yeah, it's gotten ridiculous.
It's gotten ridiculous, but it's very, very dangerous. And it's important for today's show, because the whole man issue is men should have no voice. We'll talk about no uterus, no opinion, which is one of my favorite phrases. But not as much as keep your rosaries off my ovaries. That's my favorite pro-abortion phrase, because it gives so much credibility to the rosary, and it rhymes, and you got to give some credit there. But so men should shut up because it's not our body, it's not our choice, and all of that. But now I can just say I'm a woman, and that I'm pro-life, and they'll say, well, that's ridiculous, and I'll say, of course it is. The whole thing's ridiculous. But for men to get Women of the Year awards, and you're right about the feminists, and I would even say there's a lot of people from the homosexual community that are fed up with this.
Oh, there are, yeah.
Gender's important to them. They like the same one.
Right.
So the idea that there's no gender is somebody who,
well,
identifies as a homosexual and says, no, I'm a gay guy and I like other gay men. The man part is important to them.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is there's both people who are heterosexual and homosexual are not really okay with being told that you're a bigot if you will not sleep with somebody who is biologically one sex but identifies as another. And that's where I kind of think, okay, finally, we can all see, or most of us can see how radical this has become. When you have a man who likes a man, there's a specific reason why a same-sex attracted man is attracted to other men. And when you have a woman pretending to be a man, he's kind of looking at that like, no, I specifically am identifying as homosexual because I'm attracted to men, not a woman who looks like a man or pretends to be a man. So I find that interesting. It's also very confusing when you see stories of people who are, or they say they are heterosexual, who are dating a transgender person.
Yeah,
it just
that's
is
gold.
A lot of mental gymnastics.
No,
in all of this.
But what happens is this happened at the sorority house. The guy said, "I'm a woman. I want to live with all of you ladies." Thankfully, this is in Kentucky, and the women are like, this is creepy, So they actually protested. He tried to sue. They won. So that common sense existed.
God.
But his whole thing was, I'm a lesbian.
Yeah.
So he was a dude, basically just going to the sorority house so he could sleep with all these girls.
Yeah.
And just the fact that we have pandered to this, and that's why on today's podcast we're talking about you don't have to pander to this. And a lot of men do it. They run to the sidelines because they're like, well, I don't have a uterus. Maybe it's not my choice. She wants to have an abortion. She should have an abortion. And we allow gender to determine everything. And so which is a huge mistake and a disservice to, in this case, women and the unborn. So, okay, let's get into this. So you are offended by the fact that we don't need women anymore. Men can win all the awards.
Truly.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. It is a man's world. Let me tell you.
That's right.
All right. Why men belong in the pro-life movement. We are assuming that they do. We start off with basically what I just said, which is we're not going to win. First off, half the abortions are done on women, the other half done on men, unborn women. But we won't win if half the population sits on the sidelines and says, I don't really have a say in this. And by the way, we don't do that with other issues.
Yeah, that's true. Well, men and women complement each other, and that also includes in the pro-life movement, in the fight for life, and in the fight for any sort of issue, to get justice. That we have to have men and women, and we have to have the strengths of both sides of both genders to achieve our goals. I love that. It's actually the "No Uterus, No Opinion" slogan that's been used for so long.
Mainly by men.
Yeah, I actually have mostly heard that from men.
It's
over
always
the
a
years.
dude.
Yeah.
With the pro-abortion crowd, and he's like, no uterus, no opinion. But of course, that's a contradiction because he has an opinion and he doesn't have a uterus.
Right.
So if you're a pro-abortion man, it's cool. You can have your opinion.
There was a video that came out many years ago from a group that was on a college campus where they filmed a guy that was willing to be, interviewed and filmed, holding a sign that said "No uterus, no opinion." And so they asked him about it, and his explanation of why he could indeed hold this sign was, I can't even explain it accurately, but
do you remember any of it? Because I'm really excited about hearing it.
The person interviewing him said, okay, but aren't you, by holding this sign saying I can't have an opinion, aren't you therefore having an opinion on this issue? And he said, no. He said, I'm not. I am just holding the sign that supports someone's choice, but I'm not putting my opinion out there. But it was so much better than even that. It was like, oh my gosh. So the video, I remember it. I think I actually saw it when I was still here at the Coalition for Life, here in Bryan College Station. And I remember it was called Mr. Uterus. It was called Mr. Uterus, on the title of the video. It was great. So
that's gold. Well, now Miss Uterus exists, though. That's not even. That was
It was
15
before,
years ago.
Right. It was before a lot of this started.
That made sense.
Really
he's
getting
like,
mainstream.
Hey, I'm for women being able to have a choice, but now Mr. Uterus is.
Yeah.
It can just be Miss Uterus.
Yeah. So there is no, you can see that the movement is starting to implode on itself with all of these conflicting ideologies. And one of the things I learned, I think at a rally a few years ago, was that there is no, it's not correct anymore to say no uterus, no opinion, because there could be a trans woman that doesn't have a uterus. And so now the slogan is not your uterus, not your opinion.
Right.
That way it covers that slogan now. But it is quite fun to see.
Pregnant person.
Pregnant person, yeah.
That's why people, it should anger us because they're going after children. That's a big thing with the trans movement, and they're not apologizing for it. And the homosexual movement, frankly. We saw the video recently of them chanting, "We're coming after your kids."
Yeah.
I mean, that would have never happened 5 years ago, actually. Maybe 2 years ago. But, I mean, that public display of "we're coming after the kids." The trans marketing is way too aggressive. It's like Planned Parenthood coming out saying, "We want infanticide. It's 1973. Abortion on demand, taxpayer funded, all through 40 weeks. Let's do it." In 1973, that just wouldn't fly. It was like too much too soon.
Yeah.
And the trans people have just taken that to the extreme. We want the drag queen stuff in the libraries. But I think we're gonna win that. It's not gonna last. I don't mean to downplay it because I know it's gonna get worse before it gets better. Do you remember Crystal Clear Pepsi?
No, I don't like Pepsi though. So
Well, nobody likes Pepsi. Dr. Pepper is better than
exactly.
woke Coke.
Why are we even talking about Pepsi? What's going on?
Because I'm going to make a very profound point that'll change the viewer's life. Crystal Clear Pepsi happened, I think I was in the 5th grade. Producer John, early 90s, Crystal Clear Pepsi.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay, but you drank it.
I did.
No doubt. Okay, so it was like the early 90s. And it's the same thing. I guess they made Pepsi clear with some probably unnatural, horrible chemical. And it was cool. And the can was cool. And nobody drank Pepsi, so you ran out and you bought Crystal Clear Pepsi. Then they had Crystal Clear Diet Pepsi. And it was this huge thing. And it lasted like 18 months and it went away. And it was this weird thing that everybody forgot about. And that's what I think is going to happen with the trans movement.
Okay, there's the connection.
It's Crystal Clear Pepsi.
Gotcha.
And so we need to fight it. For sure, unlike having to fight Crystal Clear Pepsi, because that was market-driven. But I think this will be market-driven in the sense that it's not sustainable because you can't have a movement where everyone is required to walk on eggshells and get offended at every little thing. It just would never work. You look at the civil rights movement, the abolitionists, the pro-life movement, all had internal divisions, arguments. They duked stuff out, and they took a better approach. That's why they're all successful. But you can't have a movement of people that just continue to like add letters to a phrase and say, well, you can't say that because I believe that I'm a plant or a furry or I identify. It's just endless. Because it's empty and they have to keep filling it and it can never be full. Well, that's why I think we'll win.
Yeah, you can't have a movement on a foundation that they're completely trying to rip up the foundation. I mean, it's not just disagreements over things. It's redefining almost everything.
Right.
One of the things that I have loved, because I'm snarky, is seeing the trolling of occasionally that we as pro-lifers can kind of do with some of this. So like, I remember, and I've said this before too, but I remember a few years ago, there was a video of some peaceful pro-life people that were standing on a sidewalk. I don't remember the city this was, of an abortion facility. And there was an abortion worker walking outside with her dog. I don't know why she had her dog with her at work, but she did. And she really, really got angry at the men. So she walked over and decided to start just yelling at him. And they were calm. And she said, "What do you know about abortion? You're a man. You're never gonna," like the typical. And he immediately said, "Why are you assuming my gender?" Ah! And she goes, her face got so contorted and she's like, "Yeah, right." And it was just, oh my God, it made me laugh so much. I was like, there you go. And so that I remember using that at a Heartbeat rally in Austin a couple of years ago when the Heartbeat law passed. There was a very small but very vibrant pro-life group amid the thousands of angry pro-abortion people. It was a pro-abortion rally in protest of the Heartbeat law. And there was a lot of men around us, a lot of pro-abortion men that had signs and they were shouting. They didn't shout as much when the women were up speaking, but they shouted every time with the men. Jason Jones was there. Dr. Joe Poyman was there. They got real, ruffled feathers when one guy was yelling across the street, "No uterus, no opinion, no uterus, no opinion." So I just couldn't help myself. I kind of stepped closer to him and I go, "How do you know?"
Yeah.
Like a couple of times, and he's just like startled by that.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get rid of reality on something like this.
Yeah.
You can have a bad idea, you can convince people, but when you're built on a negative, like segregation was. We don't want you here. Slavery, you're not part of us. And with abortion, it's you're not human. Mm-hmm. So they're built on a negative, but the trans movement is built on you can be whatever you want and must accept it for me and everybody else. and that's just not doable.
Not just accept, but celebrate.
Celebrate, yeah, you submit.
Accepting is no longer enough.
But that's not sustainable. And I just think that there's I'm a philosophy dork, and I was a double major in philosophy and history. And there's a really funny philosophy joke, which you're just like, I can see your expression on your face. You're so excited.
Suspense.
Well, there's two. Number one, the T-shirt that said, God is dead, Nietzsche. And on the back, it said, Nietzsche is dead, God. That was a great one. Okay, that was it. I had that one. Okay, so everybody gets all bent out of shape because the Christians hate you because you're walking. It says God's not dead, Nietzsche, and then you gotta like turn around because the Baptists will kill you. So I was like, it's a joke, but there's another. This is the trans thing. This is like your point about the abortion worker with the dog. Who's like, of course you're a guy. All of a sudden we go back into reality. So there's when
it's convenient.
The philosophy of like idealism, which is you don't exist, the cameras don't exist, this building doesn't exist. We're imagining it all. Mm-hmm. There is no reality. All we know is like in our brain.
The concept in your mind, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the joke is that the student goes up and takes the professor and smashes his head into the table. And he's bleeding everywhere, and he's asked, "Does the table exist?" And it's like, don't do it again. You want to go again, And so it's this violent, horrible example that people are like, yeah, like you get snapped back into reality. That's why I believe in my crystal clear Pepsi theory, because you hit a point where you can no longer put your argument forward. You cannot have a guy be the woman of the year unless you eliminate women.
Right.
So we're saying all this in the men's podcast, but to encourage the listeners and the viewers that this whole notion, because it's really bad now with men feeling like they shouldn't be involved post-Roe because of the trans movement, frankly. Everybody's like, gender came up? Let's talk about baseball. No, that's a trans topic now because of the Dodgers. Let's talk about the weather. They just don't want to deal with gender at all, and that's a huge mistake. And it's a great disservice to the unborn and women, considering abortion. So that's our number one reason, is that you can't have half the population on the sidelines, and we don't do that with other issues. We don't say, well, I don't know. I don't drink, and I've never been in a car accident. I don't know if I can tell somebody else not to drive drunk.
Right. No
alcohol, no opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do that for anything.
Yeah.
We certainly don't do that on war. I'm not in the military. I shouldn't have an opinion on whether we go to war. What are you talking about?
Right.
So we don't do this with anything else. It's total nonsense. And so don't fall for it, especially the men. There's two groups of men. They fall for it. Then there's the other group that embrace it. Like, it's kind of awesome. I don't have to deal with this.
Yeah.
It's a total, which makes it even more of a man's world. Like,
yeah.
Great. I cop out. And I'm like honored for it. Yeah, no to uterus, sir. I agree. That's why the men are always holding the signs. Okay. Our next reason of why men belong in the pro-life movement. This is where we really make people angry. But it's the role of men to defend women. Mm-hmm.
Poor, pathetic, helpless women and children.
They're useless without us.
No, really, though. It's very, I think most people, and that's why most men in the pro-life movement are involved, because they see that is their role, to protect women and children. And one thing that I have always pointed out in, for instance, sidewalk outreach trainings is because inevitably it gets brought up when there's a man in the training, when there are men in the training, and they're hesitant to be trained on this and to reach out on the sidewalks because our culture has been, the radical feminist abortion movement has been so successful in the last few decades of convincing all of us that this is a woman's issue. This is not a man's issue. Shut your mouth. And to that I say, no. Get behind me, Satan. Silence that voice because it's false. It's not true. We need men to stand up for women. Women need to stand up for women. Men need to stand up for women. Men need to stand up for the family. All of this is about the breakdown of the family, and the family has, the domestic family, the godly family has a man that is the head of the family, and that is leading. And as we read in Scripture, his role is to follow Christ. There's a verse beyond wives submit to your husbands. It doesn't stop there.
Right.
He has to die for his wife and children, as Christ died for the church. And so that is, all the more reason why we need men to continue to stand up. Now,
and the church is his bride. It's a beautiful marital.
Yes.
Thank you, St. Paul. But
Yes.
it's a beautiful image of Christ and his bride, the church, which he, of course, dies for, offering himself on the cross, and that men, whose earthly bride, that you're called to die and to crucify yourself, and to die with Christ on behalf of your family. I think abortion is the biggest beneficiary of the castration of men.
Yeah.
The biggest losers are the unborn. The second biggest losers are women. But this is a problem, and it's a problem twofold. If men cared and were involved and weren't promiscuous or sleeping around, this is like the basic 50,000 foot level, we wouldn't have this crisis. But if, whatever, they had premarital sex and she's pregnant, if men took responsibility for it, which they don't most of the time, we see men at abortion facilities and they're either encouraging it. Very rarely are they trying to get them out. Very rare. But very rarely are they even there. The woman is alone. And so this needs to be the criticism of men. It's not that it's not a man's issue in the worst way, which is what we have said so many times. And it is a man's issue in the worst way, in that the men own the abortion facilities. Most abortion
abortionists
doctors are men.
Yeah.
Nobody profits more than men. And then the promiscuous men, the irresponsible men, the bad men, they're the winners.
Yeah.
You're rewarding the bad men, as we've said many times, and we put in what to say when. And that's what gets lost. Somehow the woman's empowered because she can go have an abortion, but that's what the man wants most of the time. Yeah.
And another thing I want to say to men that I like to share anytime I'm doing outreach or giving a training or anything is, if you are confronted ever, first of all, be prepared for all of the slogans. Be prepared to have something intelligent to respond, and not just, "Oh, you're right. Oh, I'm not a woman. I won't know what it's like." You could either respond by being snarky and saying, "You don't know that I won't ever have children," but
that only gets you so far.
That only gets you so far. More seriously, I think one of the best ways that you can respond, let's say you're on the sidewalk and there's a woman that, is angry and tells you, "You will never know what it's like to be pregnant, so how dare you?" Then respond to that by acknowledging that. You know what? You're right. I will never know what it's like to be pregnant. I will never know what it's like to go through all of the things that women go through. I'll never know what it's like to be a mother. I'll never know what it's like to give birth. But I do have a mother. I do have a sister. I do have a daughter, and I care about her, and I want to make sure that she is protected and not harmed, which is precisely what the abortion industry does. It harms not just children, but women.
Gold. Because they want the man to be an island. You have no connection with women whatsoever. And I just look at when I would sidewalk counsel, I had a girlfriend and then a fiance, and now I have a wife, I have 5 daughters, I have a mom. I still have a grandma who's alive. So it's just, somehow they want the man to have no relationship with any woman or influence over any woman or care. The man's not allowed to care.
Until child support.
Until child support.
Then you have a little bit of a say, maybe.
Of course, but
responsibility.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We have to have courts tell dads to help support their children.
Yeah.
Like when you just look at child support, it's just one of these it's necessary. It's great because these guys run off or whatever.
Yeah.
It shows another problem, obviously, with divorce, which is another topic. But the fact that the government has to like chase men down to pay for their basic stuff for their own children is shameful and a bad reflection on men. But to make the man an island, you have no opinion, you don't know a woman, that's a great response. It's like, I love the women in my life. I love my mom. Like, I'm so grateful to my mom. My mom's my hero. You know, that just goes so far. And also in these conversations, like the example you just gave, most of the time there's not this militant, there's never the hostility from the woman who's going in for the abortion. I think I've encountered that twice. I mean, out of tens of thousands of women I've seen go in and have an abortion. That's not what we're talking about. But the Planned Parenthood volunteer, the workers, they just think that you're this like creepy church guy on his farm whose wife isn't allowed to vote and, you know, you make their own clothes and all this stuff. And with respect to people who make their own clothes,
There
I
you
love
go,
the
yeah.
movie Witness, Harrison Ford, great movie. Shout out to the Amish, but I don't think they can listen to this. But the whole notion that you're just this, you want to lock women up, the idea that you could love or care about a woman is very, very powerful in conversation. And it just, it puts a crack in the dam.
Yeah.
It really does.
It turns the argument over on its head by saying that you should protect women by protecting quote unquote women's rights, which is euphemism for abortion, for slaughtering children. So it turns that over on its head by saying I'm protecting women by speaking out against this.
Right. I have said to somebody, one of these militant pro-abortion people who went on the man. By the way, I should say, as a pro-life guy and somebody who's had the opportunity to lead little groups and be part of 40 Days for Life, I don't get this a lot. I think I've gotten this twice in my whole life. And I'm shocked at that, but that's just the reality. My actual day-to-day, from when nobody knew what 40 Days for Life is to all of our growth, twice, and it's been in a debate setting where somebody asks a question.
Yeah.
But I rarely get somebody coming up and saying, why should you be doing this? You're a man. I usually get the opposite, like, thank you for doing this. You're a man. But even from the pro-abortion folks, I don't get, it just doesn't happen a lot. I think I don't know why, but I would just thought I would gotten confronted about that more often anyways, but it doesn't. People think it happens to me all the time. It doesn't. But the whole notion that you can have a whole group of people silenced on a huge issue is crazy because of their gender when we're supposed to be tolerant and promote equality.
It's very sexist.
It's very sexist. The abortion movement is very, very sexist. Okay. Let's get into some scripture.
Let's do that.
We'll put these on the screen. We care about what God has to say, even though many don't. Psalm 82. Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. I've never seen a strong woman go in for an abortion. I've said that to people, like, you want to defend the weak, defend women going in for an abortion.
Or strong women who are in a very weak, low point in their life, I would say.
Yeah, very well put. Not that they're not strong, but that they're not strong at that moment. We also see, as these situations happen all the time, the inner strength win, which is beautiful. Like, you have the strength in you. You don't have to do this. And just those simple words, can happen.
I'm having a flashback now to the scene in Unplanned where it's going through essentially where the women are like cattle going through the consultation with Abby. And she is doing an excellent job of selling the abortion. Don't worry, you can do this and it's fine and it doesn't affect you in such and such way, or most women, it's normal. All these things she's doing, her tactics to convince women to go through with this, to sell the product, which she was very well trained to do. And every time it changes, there's a different woman sitting in front of her in those scenes. Every single one of them looked weak, looked vulnerable, looked very sad. None of them were smiling. None of them were like, "Great, I just bought a house."
Yeah.
Like, how empowered am I right now?
Or relief.
Again, right. And again, not to say that doesn't ever happen, but that's not the norm. And ask any abortion worker or former abortion worker who is honest, any abortion worker even now who's honest would tell you, like, no, it's not like that. It's very sad. It's a hard decision, or women just aren't skipping into their abortion appointment.
No. And that's why, when you're getting the person yelling at you and you're a man, you shouldn't have an opinion, blah, blah, blah. I've said where there's nowhere to go and you're just like, I'm just going to be honest. I've said, look, I'm a Christian. I'm not out here trying to control anybody or lock anybody up, but we're called to love everyone. And we actually do love everyone. We hate the sin and love the sinner. And while people roll their eyes at that is real. And that's exactly why Jesus died. And I love this woman going in. I love you, even though you're screaming at me. What do you love? I don't understand what you're advocating here, because it doesn't seem like you love women. It seems like you love abortion.
Yep.
Because that's always the topic. That's the only way to get them on topic of abortion is the access to it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Isaiah 1. Learn to do right, seek justice, encourage the oppressed, defend the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow.
There you go. I think that's pretty much kind of continuing on with the previous one. Just another great example of defending the rights of the most oppressed, the most innocent. Obviously, the children are in the womb are the most defenseless, but oftentimes women are defenseless too. They're being coerced. Many of our post-abortion or after-abortion care ministries that have their own internal numbers will say that anywhere from 70 to 90, 95% of the women that come through their ministry felt coerced into that decision, that they did not feel like they were exercising their right as a woman. They did not feel like they were empowered. They felt very coerced by either family member, their partner, economic status, situation. That's the reality.
It is the reality. Okay, Matthew, and then we got another Matthew that's not on here. But so it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Our Lord follows up, I think, with the strongest, scary, one of the scariest scriptures, which is it's better that you were never born. You hurt one of these little ones, have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the sea. So the late, great Sue Thayer on this podcast said to us one day, and I'd never heard this from Sue, that a pastor had told her that phrase, like to minister to her, which is pretty bold. It's a good way to get yourself thrown, out by a Planned Parenthood worker. But she said she went home and thought about it, and she Googled millstone to see how much it weighed. Like, is that true? Like, she thought about it. And I know Abby, when she was having her conversion, the reading at her Anglican church where she was going, or Episcopal church, was better to cut your hand off than it lead you to sin. And that was just her, like, I'm in trouble eternally. And for Sue to say that, I mean, working there 15 years at that point, whatever it was, you're just in your career. Some pastor, they say things. Jesus loves me for who I am. But to go home and, what does that mean? Like, how much does a millstone weigh?
That was the Holy Spirit working through her. And that's Sue's humility right there.
And that is not Pastor Bill's interpretation of the scripture. That is the direct words of Jesus, who, said a lot of things, but often gets ignored. Okay, our last scripture, Proverbs 24, rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, behold, we did not know this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his work? So just we got to get off our rear end and share his love, share the truth, and not be trapped in the eggshell game that you're going to be called judgmental anyways. And if you're judgmental, and you'll answer for that. But if you truly have a zeal for souls, when the urgency in this issue is so high, particularly at the moment, like what we encourage, going out, praying at the vigils,
it should move you.
It should move you. It's beautiful.
To action, yeah.
It's beautiful. Okay, so that's the third reason that men should be involved as God has called us. So number 4, contrary to abortion industry rhetoric, and you're here to confirm this, women want men involved in the pro-life movement. That's impossible.
Nah, yeah, we don't really want men involved. No, of course we do. Yeah,
there are great things that men should not be involved in. Grocery lists.
Remembering all
what
the
the kids are supposed to be doing every day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, of course, women want men involved. Again, that goes back to my comment earlier that men and women complement each other. Mm-hmm. We should all be working together. All of those scripture verses that we just read did not say specific to women or specific to men. Only men defend the weak and the fatherless. Only women rescue those who are being led away to the slaughter. He's calling us all to do that, and we all have our roles to play with that. So I know I can speak for every single one of our 40 Days for Life female leaders who all know that they're female, that we all want men to be involved.
Yes, real women. And look at first off, most 40 Days for Life campaigns are led by women.
Yeah.
25% of them by post-abortive women. Mm. It's amazing to see the unbelievable dedication and talent and courage of 40 Days for Life women over men who refuse to help. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like it's awesome. I mean, we don't rank our leaders, and we have great men that lead campaigns, but women leaders are always saying we need more men involved in the campaign, and where are the men? Like just in general, you know.
Well, there's something to be said too. Just even the visual of having men on the sidewalk is, number one, it helps serve for security purposes. I know that most of, from our experiences with the vigils that I have been blessed to lead, that women do feel safer when we have men also on the sidewalk with us. Because anybody of ill will who wants to attack people on the sidewalk, they're going to be less likely to do it if they see men standing on the sidewalk, because men are typically, they're defenders, so they're going to be more likely to get physically involved if they have to step in front of a woman.
That's not sexist, Heather Gardner. That's like a police thing. They tell us, you need to have men out there because it makes people think.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of women out there that could kick my butt. There's no doubt about it. But the perception at a 40 Days for Life vigil is that there are men out there, and it's just not women who would be perceived as sitting ducks by criminals.
Right. And there's also a benefit too, because as a person who's trained in sidewalk advocacy, sidewalk counseling, we get the opportunity to reach out to people that are going into these facilities. But oftentimes there's a situation where a guy, the partner, will come outside after dropping the woman off inside. And I could try to talk with him, but sometimes he needs a guy to talk to. And so if I have a fellow male volunteer that's trained on the sidewalk with me, I can kind of motion for him to come over and try to talk with this guy. Because guys kind of, a lot of times, they want to square up, with one another. They'd more likely talk or maybe benefit from talking to another guy who is a stable male figure on the sidewalk.
Hey, that works in reverse too, and it happened to me a lot, because if I was out there, the boyfriend who decided to come would be like, I'm going to show these Christian nerds, I'm going to defend my woman on the day of the abortion. And he would like buck up at me because especially if I was the only guy, and I would like back off, and then a woman sidewalk counselor would come forward, and all of a sudden he kind of shrinks up.
Yeah.
Because he wants to act all bit like it's some duel between he and I. It's ridiculous. And then when I bow out, like, whatever, and the woman walks up to talk to his girlfriend, he don't want anything to do with her.
Yeah.
I think the guy driving his girlfriend or wife in to have an abortion is terrified of strong pro-life women.
Yeah.
More so than a pro-life guy, because then it's like a bravado thing. But a strong woman saying, don't do this to your woman, it's powerful.
Especially, I can think of many examples over the years where a guy just assumed that if there was a woman on the sidewalk and she's praying, she's this weak, vulnerable little like Christian girl who's totally innocent, and he wants to scandalize her.
Oh yeah.
And so he wants to make, really nasty comments, maybe about her looks or about whatever. And I've seen that, and it's happened to me. And when it's
happened to nuns.
Yeah, of course. And when I don't respond, or that, that woman doesn't respond the way that he wants, where like, it's like clutching the pearls, then we've kind of disarmed them. Like, okay, you've got a nasty mouth, so what? And how about let's talk about why you're here and how you're not being a man defending your wife and child, or your partner and your child, like you're supposed to do as a man. So
powerful. And is there anything else when they go on a rant? And that works with men or women, but especially men. You don't tell, and you're like, is there more? Are you done? Like, can we talk? Because you have to disarm them, and they got to get it out. And they don't want to be there. There's an indirect impact of a conversation like that, where the woman who's going in for the abortion sees you disarm her man, which she probably has not been able to do with his role, whether he supports the abortion or doesn't, possibly, or whatever. But there's a good dynamic there of he's sort of out of words. Maybe I should reconsider this. We've definitely seen that. And we've seen men turn around.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful. We've seen men turn around when they see other men, and I've seen situations where men are just called out by men, and that's a judgment call, but it can work.
Yeah.
It can definitely work. You're not a man, you're a coward.
Right.
It's Russian roulette at that point. I mean, you're rolling the dice, but it can work. You have to have a lot of experience out there, and you have to know who's around you and all of that. But
we also don't want to forget, Sean, that some men are involved because of a woman in the pro-life movement.
That's true. I've heard those stories.
Mm-hmm. I've heard one too, particularly with you.
Oh, that's right. Myself. Thank you, Mary Lisa. It's been wonderful. So yeah, I didn't want to go out and pray at Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. That's why when guys are like, you think you're better than me? I'm like, no, I am you. I don't want to go. I don't want to go out now. I'd rather watch movies and smoke ribs and hang out with the kids. But it's one of those where you don't. That's the selfish guy thing. Like, I believe my life is my own. It's just an endless road. And I don't really want anybody to want to go out there. I want them to want to will the will of God and serve and make sacrifices. But you're not jumping out of your bed on Saturday morning like, man, there's some great college football on today. It doesn't work like that with Planned Parenthood. It's very rewarding, very satisfying, but it's not this huge desire to just constantly,
look death in the face.
Absolutely. And so, when Mary Lisa was like, I go out, we start dating, I go out to pray at Planned Parenthood, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome, because I was super like pro-life Catholic nerd high school kid when I got to college. And she's like, yeah, so we're going on Saturday. And I'm like,
how about that?
After the Aggies play? But I went. But she said it like, I'm going to wake up on Saturday and be breathing and the sky will be blue. Like, this is happening. Mm-hmm. No, like, check the weather.
This is
what do
my litmus test. Is this man really worth my
That's
time?
why we've had so many marriages. I think we're over 100 40 Days for Life.
Are you kidding?
Marriages.
100?
Yes. And in day 41, which if you don't get it, you need to get it.
Wow.
Day 41, we finally took, there's no like top 10, but we took the most interesting, one of which is Robert in England and his wife.
The most known ones.
No, we didn't even do the most known.
Okay.
Like I wasn't in there, Steve wasn't in there. It was just random people that volunteered. They met and they just checked off the boxes. Like, we're both Christian, most likely. Not that you have to be. Pro-life. Take action on that. Take action in this particular way, which is deemed controversial. Single.
Yeah, that's important too.
We've thankfully. But that's a lot. Yeah, we've reached over 100 marriages through Tomislav and Pamela. We're at the symposium. Look, this makes no sense. You're German, you're Colombian. This isn't going to work. But y'all are getting married, and it worked out. It's great.
Right.
They got married. But that happens a lot.
Yeah,
that happens a whole lot. So maybe you're a guy, and maybe you're kind of like a loser at relationships. You should participate in 40 Days for Life and give that a shot. You could find your spouse.
Here we have the reputation. Oh, the losers are on the sidewalk.
No. You're a loser in this one area. Like maybe you're picking the wrong women. Maybe you have no game. I don't know. But whatever it is, this is a new thing to try. That's a good way to get more men out.
This could go either way.
You may find your spouse. Quit being a coward and go out there. And, everybody's just...
Okay,
everybody's just talking to one another.
The next biggest challenge then is to have a write-up on how many babies.
Oh, well, that's.
I mean, if you're pro-life, you're good chance you're going to have a whole bunch of them. So, 100 marriages, how many babies are out of that? That's amazing.
No. It's a lot. It's a lot. That should be another Day 41 article. Okay. Our second to last reason, number 6, every child has a mother and father. We all have a mother and father. The whole notion that a father has no say in his child's life is something that fortunately we're still fighting. I know people are fighting against that, but that's still a dominant force. And everybody has that. It's a good reminder on the sidewalk of like why men need to be involved, because we're involved in, it's a big problem. Make the child and then have no say, and somehow women win. Yeah. It's the dumbest thing. It's the worst thing for women.
Yeah.
And so, anyways. Okay. Our last, this is also, I think, controversial. Our last point. Men are uniquely equipped to talk with the husbands and the boyfriends of abortion-bound women. And I do think that. I think that there's a perfect time for us. And then I think there's a time, as I mentioned earlier, where we need to get out of the way because the guy like thinks it's high noon or something.
Yeah.
But when they're not like I'm going to out-butch you because I'm the abortion guy and you're the pro-life guy and I'll show you what a real man is, I'll take her in there. When they're not that, which most of the time they're actually not, you can get them. You can get them. How many times have we seen, we don't encourage smoking outwardly on this podcast, but how many times have you offered the guy a cigarette?
I haven't ever, actually.
Well, you're a health nut. Okay, but like other people. The guy comes out to smoke.
I know that has happened before.
It happens all the time. Happens in Europe a lot. 40 Days campaigns because they all still smoke.
That makes sense.
Even though they're like socialist governments have like, you like buy a Diet Coke over there. It has like the guy's throat from throat cancer. And you're like, this is a Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Why can't,
we've got commercials, anti-smoking commercials that are all about lung cancer and warning against tobacco companies. So yeah,
but in
Europe it makes more sense.
10 times worse. Okay. And more people smoke. I don't understand it. But so it happens a lot, but whatever it is, you offer them a bottle of water, but the guys will come out when they take the woman back and they'll have a cigarette. And if I don't smoke cigarettes, but if you do, you should probably light up and be like, hey man, come over here. Even though you may have some like wonderful family say, don't smoke around my kid, but it's worth it to try to snag a guy. But
this is controversial. Sean was right.
But
there's a lot of you who are disagreeing with this right now.
It happens. And it's very real because if you get the guy, I've seen we have stories, multiple stories. Whatever. The guy is smoking. He's smoking a cigarette. She's in the back. Somebody goes over and they're by the fence and they light up and it's like, just go get her, man. Like, go get her. Go get her. And they go do it. So there has to be, that's when the man talking to the boyfriend is gold.
So I have a really great story that this reminds me of, and I know that this is our final point, and I jumped the gun a little bit earlier and said this, but this story was from Austin several years ago. There was a guy who had just gotten trained as a sidewalk outreach person. So first time on the sidewalk as a newly trained person, and I'm there, and he's kind of shadowing me. And there was a couple that went in, and the husband came back outside just a few moments later. And he went right up to the newly trained male sidewalk outreach person, sidewalk counselor. And he was nice. He wasn't defensive or angry or anything. In fact, what it turned out had happened was he and his wife were from India. They were newly migrated to the United States. They were excited to start their lives here and their family. And they found out she was pregnant, and they were told by the health department, going through immigration services and going through other, just kind of getting their paperwork and all this advice from the health department, that they needed to go to this abortion facility because it's not a good idea to start having a baby right now when they're brand new in this country and they need to establish themselves.
Isn't that how America was formed? Just like foreigners coming here and having children?
They needed to establish themselves, get on their feet first. And by the way, this is what women do. This is what we do as Americans. This is an American thing. So it turns out he didn't want the abortion. And so he talked with this guy, and this guy said, go inside and get her. She deserves better than this. You deserve better. You don't want to do this, believe me. So he goes back inside. He goes back inside, and we didn't know, so we're praying. And 10 minutes later, they both walk outside. She's crying, and they both come straight to the fence and next to me and the new sidewalk counselor. And she says, I was waiting for him to say something. So she just thought, they basically just really internalized the crap that the Department of Health told them. Whatever representatives that were, this social worker that had their best interest at heart.
Yeah, I shouldn't have a baby. I'm new here.
That's not
racist.
They wanted children, and they wanted this baby. It wasn't like they got a poor diagnosis and it wasn't anything like that. Not that that's a good reason anyway. But it was literally just, you're new, you need to get yourself, your feet on the ground first and get established before you even think about starting having kids. And that baby was saved, thankfully, because that father spoke with the first time male sidewalk counselor.
I'm going to say this, and then we'll wrap up because it's a rabbit trail. But I think our viewers and listeners are thinking about this. So you're new here. Do not come here and start having children because you're new to the country. Somehow that's not extremely racist, and it's got a little taste of eugenics. At the same time, these people at the Department of Health and Human Services want us to open up borders so that we can bring children in. Mm-hmm. Which is it? Mm-hmm. Like, are we pro-kid or not? Mm-hmm. This is the inconsistency that abortion puts out there.
But in their mind, that kid exists already.
I guess so.
The one in her womb didn't exist. So,
I guess so.
Even though something exists for you to get rid of. But do you want families here
or not?
Right.
Yeah, if they're homeless and standing at the border. There's no consistency. Yeah. Anyways. We're not even about to get into immigration. I already brought up smoking cigarettes with people. I do not smoke cigarettes, by the way. Okay.
I don't smoke cigarettes, guys.
Okay, we're insulting all the smokers out there. Yeah, they're already persecuted enough. Poor things. Okay. So we'll do a quick review here. Why men are supposed to be part of the pro-life movement. Why they're called to be part of the pro-life movement. And if you are a man, shout out to Jim Ball in Green Bay, who challenged his men to go out to his 24-hour vigil in the winter. And Jim's speech is awesome. I've heard him give it about 1 million times. It's like 10 seconds long, which is you put your butt in the deer stand at 5:30 in the morning, you go to Lambeau Field and sit out in the cold. You can get up in the middle of the night and defend women and the unborn.
That's right. Shout out to the Knights of Columbus who do that a lot too.
Basically, get your butt out of bed speech by Jim Ball, which is just a great little thing. And in our leader training, we have like, this is how you recruit volunteers. He just like shreds that and is like, quit being a wuss. Get out there.
That's right.
So we need that as men. So be sure to do that. Okay. We will not end abortion of half the population on the sidelines. Number 2, the role of a man is to defend women and children. Number 3, God has called us. Number 4, contrary to the abortion industry rhetoric, women want men involved in the pro-life movement. Number 5, the presence of a man praying at a 40 Days for Life also helps the abortion-bound woman have a positive experience with a man. Number 6, every child has a mother and a father. And number 7, men are uniquely equipped to talk with the husbands and the boyfriends of an abortion-bound woman. So there we go. We did all this without Steve Carlin.
Amazingly.
No, and his thoughts on the smoking thing would have been funny. But yeah, otherwise, we hopefully Steve is about to arrive.
But we missed you, Steve.
We do miss you, Steve, and thank you for writing the outline and doing all the work for it and having us steal it and record it without you. So we appreciate it. Thank you, Heather. Be sure to rate, review, share this podcast, and buy Scalpel and the Soul. We will see you next time. God bless you.